when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
Can you have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
You know, this is the first place that looks like it's hiding from the world.
I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them. And none of us can ever get out.
Is anyone at home?
Oh, that must be my mother.
Is anything wrong?
Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
Put me down.
Mother! Oh, God! Mother!
What are you running away from?
She looked like a wrong one to you?
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Hello and welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. Psycho from 1960. A lot's been said about this film, and so it's. I thought it was time that I talked about my relationship with this movie. I can tell you that after thinking about it and watching it, I realised that I've deeply underappreciated this film over the years and just taken it for granted. I first saw it when I was about 15. It was recommended to me by my auntie. She was really into old kind of thrillers and suspense films, and she mentioned another film to me at the time called The Spiral Staircase, which I also checked out, and it was pretty creepy. I think she saw that I was getting interested in these kinds of films and reading heaps of Stephen King novels at the time. When I was 15 in 1987, she came and stayed with us, lived with us for a little while. Anyway, at that time, I didn't really understand why she wanted to recommend this black and white film from 1960 to me. I'd heard of Psycho, but it just felt like an old black and white irrelevant film by Alfred Hitchcock, who I think I knew at the time from the TV series that was on, where there were like, I don't know, half-hour or hour episodes built around a Hitchcock-like story. And it just didn't sound like it'd be really that interesting or that effective as a horror film. And I think it's like what every generation has, where you think something that's been made 20 or 30 years before is being irrelevant and it's not going to be any good. It's not modern enough and doesn't understand the times. So why would you waste your time with it? And I think that's the first thing that popped into my head. And I think I only watched it out of probably respect for her. I didn't want to hurt her feelings. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it at the time without really kind of understanding its impact or I think taking notice of the film fully or taking it all in or even concentrating. But I liked it. And I can remember recommending it to other folks, other people my age, which probably even seemed weirder to them. But anyway, what's the film about? I mean, everyone probably knows, but I'll go through the motions and tell you what it's about. The story starts with a character called Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh. She's stuck in a fairly ordinary life situation. She's having an affair with a married man. That's how the film opens. Quite interesting that it starts with Janet Leigh in bed with this married man played by John Gavin, and they're having an afternoon tryst in Arizona. And anyway, she has an opportunity to make off with $40,000 from her employer. She ums and ahs for a minute and then takes off, leaves town, goes on the run, driving through the rain, pulls over for a while, has a nap. A policeman pulls over, is interested in what she's doing in the middle of nowhere. She's not very convincing. He follows her. She trades in a car without taking the new one for a test drive. That also increases the interest in her from the police. Back in Arizona, her boyfriend is getting questioned by the police. Not by the police, sorry, by a private eye played by Martin Balsam, who's investigating where the money went to. And her sister, played by Vera Miles, is also on the scene and is concerned about her. That's all going on. But the main event is yet to come, because eventually, in a rainstorm, she can hardly see where she's going. She's tired. Up ahead on the right appears a motel sign, Bates Motel. And guess what? They've got vacancies, 12 of them, in fact. 12 cabins, 12 vacancies. There she meets a very helpful young man named Norman Bates. He's shy, he's awkward, but very, very helpful and quick with a smile. He runs the motel under the control of his unseen mother, who lives in the creepy house above. And at first, Norman just seems quite nervous and jittery, but basically harmless. He's obviously charmed by Marion Crane, and who wouldn't be? And they have a nice little dinner together, and then the film shifts completely out of the blue in the scene that this film is famous for, and Marion's out of the picture. So anyway, then Martin Balsam arrives, the private investigator. Then the sister and the boyfriend, they show up as well at the Bates Motel. And what follows is a slow uncovering of what actually happened at the motel, and a gradual realization of who Norman Bates really is. And the film eventually shifts from a fairly standard kind of Hitchcockian crime story into something much more psychological, way ahead of the times, dealing with issues of identity, definitely repression and control. So there's a lot going on in this film. Alfred Hitchcock, everyone's heard of him. I think it's interesting to realize where this film sits in Hitchcock's career. He'd been making films since the late 20s, and he'd go on to make films until around the mid 70s. He was in a real purple patch around this time. He'd just come off North by Northwest. Before that, Vertigo. Other big films in the 50s included Rear Window and The Trouble with Harry. We could sit here all day and talk about his big films, Strangers on a Train, Spellbound. There's heaps of them with big stars. We're talking Gregory Peck, we're talking Cary Grant, Grace Kelly, Jimmy Stewart. The list goes on. And afterwards, Paul Newman was in Torn Curtain, another film that was reasonably successful in the mid-60s. So we're talking about big, polished Hollywood thrillers for the most part, usually star-driven, controlled, very confident filmmaking. He'd really honed his craft by the time Psycho came around. But Psycho's quite different when you sit down and think about it. This is the thing with Psycho and Hitchcock. They've always been there in the background, and I've certainly taken them for granted, and I suspect a lot of other people have too. Psycho is really a much smaller film. It's a lot more claustrophobic. It's very stripped back, atmospheric. It's more radical than anything he'd done before. And I do think it's his best and most important film. And a big reason why it is his best film is because of Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins, for me, is one of those actors where, sadly, the role that he's best known for has just completely defined him. and he never outran it. He was acclaimed for this role, no doubt about it. But if you look at what he was doing before it and what he was doing after it, I think you get the picture. He definitely wasn't a Hitchcockian type of an actor. His looks are quite different than a Cary Grant. He's definitely not bringing that. He's not bringing that leading man energy, that confidence, confidence around women. He comes across as quite sensitive, and he had some emotionally fragile roles leading into this, including films like Friendly Persuasion, Fear Strikes Out. I've seen Fear Strikes Out. That's a really interesting film about a baseball player. And he followed this with The Trial, the Orson Welles film based on the Franz Kafka fantastic novel, that one. Highly recommend. Don't think I've seen the film, oddly. I might have. No, I have seen the film. I saw it once. I didn't think a lot of it. I was probably too young, but I love the book. Interesting side note. But when Psycho came around, he was perfect for the role because he has that nervous, vulnerable screen presence. It's a like for like with the Norman Bates character. And what Psycho does, the script of Psycho and Hitchcock's direction does, is it takes those qualities inherent within Anthony Perkins and it distorts them, it sharpens them, it amplifies them. It's not just a horror performance. Perkins puts across a fractured emotional performance. Everything about him feels slightly unstable. Like if you just stir him a little bit, and you see this in the film, he cracks and he either pushes back aggressively, like in the scene with Janet Leigh in the parlor when they're having their extravagant dinner of sandwiches and milk, and she starts making some pretty innocuous comments about, hasn't he ever considered about moving out, putting his mother somewhere more appropriately, and he lashes out. He also lashes out against John Gavin in the film when Gavin tries to sidetrack him and provoke him a bit so that Vera Miles can investigate the house and hopefully speak to Mrs. Bates. And even with Martin Balsam as the hard-boiled private investigator, he gets he gets very defensive and eventually asks him to leave. But there's a lot of anxiety there, and a really quick smile comes out a lot to try and cover it up. It's a masterful performance. I really think it's one of the great undervalued performances. I feel like he was so good, and he's been memed so often. He's known for this role that people forget to actually look at it in context and acknowledge how brilliant it is. I think it was way ahead of its time. I mean, the whole film is, but Perkins' performance is way ahead of its time, and I think it's one of the best performances of at least the second half of the 20th century. Sadly, though, I think it completely locks him into that cultural image of Norman Bates. He could never escape that, no matter what. I found that when I was seeing him in other films. I mean, it's like seeing who else? It's like seeing Leonard Nimoy, who was Mr. Spock from Star Trek in other films, and I saw him in films in the 70s too, and I always thought it was really weird and jarring to see him in a movie set on Earth, and not to have those fantastic ears that he had. It was a bit like that with Anthony Perkins, just so typecast as Norman Bates. You look at his career after this, he doesn't disappear, but he never really escapes it. He never really has the same impact. He was in films like Murder on the Orient Express, amongst many other stars, playing one of the suspects. The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean with Paul Newman. You know, yes, it's a Paul Newman film. but it's, it's not Psycho. Catch Me a Spy, Mahogany. It's all steady work, but it never gets him to the same level again. It's more like a working actor phase. Some crime films, some ensemble pieces, some supporting roles. Then in the early 80s, who would have thought Psycho 2 comes out? And then Psycho 3 years later. So instead of escaping Norman Bates, he returns to him. It almost felt to me at the time, when I went back and watched Psycho 2 not long after watching Psycho, and sort of hearing a bit more about his career, I felt like he just gave in and thought, hell, people just think of me as Norman Bates anyway. I may as well do the role again and get something out of it, and stop resisting. Anyway, really interesting actor. From looking into his life a little bit, there was a lot of juggling going on. There was a lot that he was trying to deal with. He was trying to keep his private life private. He succeeded for the most part until he passed away. You can look into that for yourself, but this film shows that he was an exceptional actor. Getting back to Hitchcock, I think obviously for me, Psycho is just the full flowering of his brilliance. But he'd been building to it for a long time. Even the earlier films are so good. Shadow of a Doubt, Notorious, Spellbound. They already show him working with paranoia, with these ideas about identity, definitely full of psychological tension. But in Psycho, everything just becomes more heightened, more stripped back, more daring, but also more controlled, more focused on withholding information for the most part, rather than displaying it. It's a pure cinematic masterclass, and that's what makes it so effective. A big part of that is Bernard Herrmann's score. When you sit back and actually take notice of it, it's doing far more than just supporting the film. Hitchcock uses Herrmann's score to really structure the tension of the film itself. From the opening titles, you can already feel like something is off. There's the sound, but there's also the way that the titles are trying to match together and not quite doing it. Just like the Norman Bates character, there's something a little bit off. So yeah, Bernard Herrmann, of course, went on to do lots of Hitchcock movies, and also might have been his last performance. He scored Taxi Driver. There's some parallels between Norman Bates and Travis Bickle, by the way. If you don't have to look too far to see that. In a generational context, I think for my generation, Hitchcock was already kind of locked in as classic cinema, and classic cinema had a negative connotation to it. It was something that wasn't seen as relevant anymore. It was seen as what your parents liked, and you didn't want to like anything they liked. It was too old-fashioned. Some of them were in black and white. Some of them had these stars that you've seen in other movies recently where they were old people. So why would you want to go back and watch them as young people? Why wouldn't you want to watch Friday the 13th Part 4? Or, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. I think shows like the Alfred Hitchcock Presents series probably didn't help with that. It turned him into something a bit cheaper and a bit more readily accessible and more of a brand than the extraordinary filmmaker that he was. But for me personally, I've got a very I have a different history now with Hitchcock, because after I saw Psycho in the late 80s, I think I might have seen Vertigo or North by Northwest, one of those two, not that long afterwards. But then a couple of years later, so I'm in my late teens, early 20s by then, there was a there was an Australian film critic called Bill Collins. Very idiosyncratic, very beloved, and I guess mocked in equal part. Probably by generation. I think the older folks really had grown up with him or were used to him. The younger folks thought he was a bit of a windbag, bit over the top, bit too enthusiastic, a bit irrelevant and past it. Anyway, he used to introduce films once or twice a week. I think it was Channel 10. He put on a whole Hitchcock retrospective, and I think he did nearly all, if not all, the films. And he introduced all of them. He talked about them. He talked about how they were made, their cultural impact. He talked about some of the stars in them. And it was fascinating. And it came along just at the right time for me. I tuned into just about all of them. I think they might have even been in chronological order. And went through the whole catalogue and got a really good understanding of the greatness of Hitchcock. So really, really glad that happened. Influence. I mean, this is a no-brainer. You can see Hitchcock's language everywhere now. I think without him operating for that 40 years or so that he was, other filmmakers, I mean, Brian De Palma's always the one that gets mentioned. He was accused of directly lifting Hitchcock's themes and even shots and ideas directly and putting them in his films. I'm a huge fan of De Palma. I don't think that that's the case. I think that De Palma, in his best films at least, just updated and modernized and stylized and changed them and paid homage to Hitchcock. So I take that view about De Palma. But, you know, films like Rear Window, this, Vertigo, countless other ones have basically become part of cinematic language now. They're ingrained so deeply that it's probably hard to even identify all the influences that Hitchcock had. I think an interesting thing about this film and something that shows you how great it is that it's rewatchable. Well, it is to me. I know everything that happens in this film. I know when it's going to happen, but it still works completely because it doesn't just rely on the surprise element at the end. It relies on the execution, enjoying the structure and the filmmaking, the performances, the cinematography, the score, for God's sake. For me, it sits alongside films like The Sixth Sense in that way, where rewatching it actually strengthens it. You can go back and look for, and I do this unconsciously with films like Psycho and The Sixth Sense. I go back and I look for little tells along the way that should have alerted me, or that I see, okay, that's why he said that, or that's why he looked at her that way, or all those little things. I think that's an interesting thing to do. So I think Psycho has been absorbed into film language so much now that it's really easy to underestimate what it did. It was shocking at the time. It remains shocking now when you watch it, and you think about. I think about what the actors were thinking about. Like, how did Janet Leigh feel in that shower scene? How did Anthony Perkins feel, especially in the final scene where he gets caught? How did he feel then? It must have been challenging. It's probably very enjoyable. It must be fun as an actor to push that envelope, especially under the direction of someone so fantastic as Hitchcock, who was really hard to work with, by the way. There's been a lot said about that. I thought it might be interesting to start putting a bit of a segment in about whether this is a date film or not. I think it's a yes and a no. I don't think it's a first date watch. I think if you took someone along to this as a first date, just the title maybe says a bit too much about you for someone who doesn't know you at all. Probably brings up mother issues. If you're the guy taking the girl to this date, it's 2026 now. The film's 66 years old. That might be a bit of a too revealing look into your psyche. The yes part of me, though, says a few dates along or further along in the relationship, when they realize that you like weird things like this, or interesting, let's go with interesting things like this. Yeah, take someone along then. I'd love to take someone. It'd be cool to show this movie now to someone who didn't know anything about it, and I think that's possible. It's pretty old. I think younger audiences maybe know elements of this, but they certainly don't know the full picture. And it's just possible that the reveal hasn't been picked up by everyone. I don't know. I'm a bit out of touch, so I'm just hypothesizing. Final thoughts. I think my final thoughts are that Psycho isn't just a famous film. It's a foundational film leading up to films becoming much more relevant to the people that were watching them, and more relatable's the wrong word for a film like this, but more edgy, interesting, emotionally affecting. It doesn't just rely on its twist. It really survives it, thrives on it. And I think that's why it holds up so well on the rewatch. I think it was never just about telling a story. It was really trying to show something that hadn't been shown before, especially in shocking ways that this film does. Blood mingling with the shower water as it goes down into the drain. Just the sight of a blurred figure moving up to the shower curtain, I found quite shocking. Other little things I found after he's watched the car sinking down into the marshes, and he turns around and the light's just perfect so that you can't really see his eyes properly, and you can just see these hollowed out orbs, and he's just glancing back up at the camera. Really chilling. The final shots of him sitting there with the blanket and the fly on his hand, very creepy still. Just I better stop. This is going to go forever. Check it out if you haven't seen it, is my advice. It's well worth it. Even if you think you know everything about it, just sit down and concentrate, give it its due, watch it at night by yourself, or with someone who hasn't seen it. That'd be good fun. Enjoy Psycho 1960. Thanks for listening as always. See you next time.